Bentley. I'm happy to welcome you here to our London office, home of, I think, one of the best views I've ever seen of London. You agree? Thank you. Thank you. There aren't too many people who come in here and say the view's terrible. So enjoy. You can see at least the south side of London. All right. Really quickly, the obligatory details about exit. So the emergency exit, if the alarm were to go off, is right over here where Amelia's standing. It is on the way to the ladies' room also, so the ladies' room is also down that hallway. If the alarm goes off, we are not expecting any drills, so that'll be the real thing, and we will all need to exit. The gents' restroom, if you haven't found it yet, is on the other side of the lobby, there, you can't miss it. If anybody needs extra time or assistance evacuating, let us know, and we'll be happy to help you. All right, so that out of the way. This session will run about 90 minutes, and then we will have a coffee break, and then we will have the second session. So just to set your expectations. And I just want to add, it has been a really great week for me here at London Climate Week. We started here on Monday morning with a group of grade 6 kids who came in from north of here, presenting a rail design project that they had been working on. Really inspiring. And the thing that I loved about their presentations, they were describing why they were, what the purpose of the rail station was, how it was serving the community, how it was important to be getting input from the community throughout the process, how important environmental considerations were. So it wasn't just sort of a engineering design presentation. It was really very holistic, and frankly, I think the way many of us, all of us in this room, would love to see all infrastructure be planned and designed, right? Taking into account not just the economics and the aesthetics, but also the environmental and social impacts. And I would say for me, that's been one of the recurring themes. I've been in lots of sessions every day. I certainly look forward to this one. But I think there is certainly a growing awareness of the importance of sustainable infrastructure, including community involvement, including social impact, including environmental impact, and that's great to see. I think the second thing that I would highlight from my own attendance at different sessions is there is a little bit of a sense. There was a person in a session this morning who said to the effect that it feels like at these gatherings, we're all talking to people who who go to the same gatherings, and we're sort of talking to ourselves a little bit, right? And that, oh man, the time is now for action. And I think that is a strong feeling that I see in the world of sustainable infrastructure and resilient infrastructure. People are like, okay, enough talk, let's go. Let's go. So I look forward to hearing from our panelists today. What's next? What do we do to go, right? We need to get people going. So with that, let me introduce our first speaker of this session, Azmat Jina, Senior Advisor on Urban Climate Finance and Inclusive Action at the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. And she is going to deliver our opening remarks. That's quite a title, my goodness.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. This is really intimidating to be up here with all of this light, so be kind. Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you, Bentley Systems, for hosting us during London Climate Action Week. This is the first time in a long time. I'm based in London, and I've spent pretty much since Monday, 8 o'clock till 10 p.m. whizzing around the city. And I feel like this Climate Action Week is definitely buzzier and busier. So it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts as well. I definitely feel that we're working towards kind of the ambition COP30 has set about being the COP of implementation. So Chris, I think they heard your message. And thank you for joining us. I know that there's lots of competing themes and interesting topics and interesting lunches that we all need to savor. So thank you so much for joining this session, and we're really keen to hear from you as well a little bit later. We're going to have almost a 90-minute session, I think, as Chris laid out, with a couple of presentations and then a panel with a Q&A. So hold on to your questions. And I understand that this event is being recorded and it's going to be available on ICSI's YouTube channel as well. So I think that's about as much as I need to do on the housekeeping. So I am a senior advisor. So I work on urban climate finance for GCoM, which is the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. We are a network of 13,700 signatory cities in 147 countries. We represent almost 1 billion people across the planet, and we work through the mayors. It's a pretty powerful city alliance. So one side of my portfolio is around urban climate finance, and then there's another side which is about getting money to cities to develop and adapt their infrastructure. And then the other side of my portfolio is around gender and inclusion, which is about making sure that that money that's going to the infrastructure that is yet to be built or is being adapted is actually fit for purpose for the people that are going to use it. And I guess that's fundamentally, there's like a moral imperative that the people that are paying to use these services around infrastructure, the people that are going to need this infrastructure, we know that there's rapid urbanization. A lot of my work is focused on the global south. For secondary and intermediary cities, where we know that there's a lack of capacity, there's a lack of capability, there is an issue around creditworthiness in municipalities. But that's where the urbanization is going to happen. That's where the urban growth is going to be. And at least 51% of that population is female. And then there are intersecting identities around disability, around indigeneity, around being a migrant, etc., that need to be accounted for in how this infrastructure is built, because a lot of that infrastructure for the Global South doesn't yet exist. If we're going to build it, we need to build it well from the offset. There's no point building something that locks us into a really bad route that doesn't work for the people that need it to work for them. And this is about livelihoods, it's about safety, it's about health and air quality, access to leisure. It's about quality of life, right? So we talk about it in terms of a climate sense, but it really is, cities are the engines. It's about good jobs, livable cities, and it's about good growth as well. I think I've explained why cities and why infrastructure. My other bullet point says why climate impacts and women and marginalized communities. And I think it's because even now, the climate impacts, women are the community most impacted by climate change. They are the ones that end up with additional caregiving responsibilities. I'm currently working on a gender and inclusion toolkit for GCoM cities, in terms of integrating gender and inclusion considerations into their climate action planning and implementation with my colleagues from WSP at the back there. And in terms of the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, only 23 of the 120 actually talk about gender equality. That's a teeny tiny amount for more than half of the population, and more if we look at intersecting identities. It's just not good enough that you have infrastructure that's built, volumes of cash that's spent, and it doesn't meet the need of the citizens that you're spending it for. So that's why climate impacts. These are the people that are frontline, in terms of floods, heat. When you come to the urban poor, we're going to hear from Sheila. That's not an exception. That's most people's experience of how cities work for them, and we've got to do better. So I'm really excited about the conversation. I'm going to stop there. We are going to have a couple of best practice examples, looking at solutions that build community resilience, that are hopefully holistic and transferable, inclusive at their core. We're looking at the role of participatory planning. We're going to be looking at the need for disaggregated data to inform that planning. And so with that, I am going to hand to Marcia, who is the... I need to say actually 2 more things. So the insights from this session are going to be incorporated into ICSI's 2025 edition of the Climate Resilient Infrastructure Report. I think there's a call for case studies. So if you have case studies you'd like to submit, please do so. And I'm sure that Gemma and colleagues from ICSI can share the link to that as well. And with that, I will pass over to Marcia, who is the Director of Adaptation with the Climate Champions team. Thank you.
Thank you, Asma. And it's great to see everyone and to be with you today. Very much excited to also share opportunities for accelerating action with the COP30 new released action agenda. On Friday, COP30 presidency released its 4th letter. It's an action agenda that is bringing the leadership of the countries, the governments, with the real economy in one action agenda. It's an opportunity to contribute, to elevate, and to highlight all those solutions that brings inclusivity, but as well the many efforts that have been advanced through the initiatives, the organizations, the different actors across cities, coalitions that are advancing this agenda. So it's a recognition to your work, to your leadership. Very specifically, want to focus on the coordination, maybe just because there perhaps new actors today with us. The presidency is appointing a high-level champion. The high-level champion for Brazil was appointed in February, is Dani Oshpe. He represents the COP30. We are the team, the Climate Champions team, supporting the delivery of both champions, COP29 and COP30. They are having a 2-year rotation. And ideally, we are this year going to prove that a one action agenda is possible, is feasible, and really needed to mainstream, to streamline efforts, but especially to highlight the progress that is already existed. We don't want to duplicate. We don't want to dilute. The agenda on adaptation is becoming much more shape and form than ever, and it's being prioritized. When you have access to that 4th letter, which is located in the site of the UNFCCC, but also on the website of COP30, you will identify that adaptation is coming as a coherent agenda across the many different axes that are prioritized to showcase progress, but especially that there is a people angle, a recognition that people is at the center of climate action because of the impacts and because as well the different people are exposed differently to the climate risk and impact. And this is exactly what brings us together to the conversation today. How do we address those gaps, those extra risks, those vulnerabilities that specific people are probably more exposed than others? And in that sense, there is one specific axis of that, trying to get my phone connected so that I can read the entire, yes, perfect. There's the axis 4 that I want to share, which is very much focused on building resilience for cities, infrastructure, or water. And so clear it cannot be. That means we're going to bring exist multiple solutions to advance resilience of cities. It's not just one or two. But the presidency in this action agenda wants to elevate a few of those very critical solutions that especially bring us to this conversation. And one of them is sustainable and resilient constructions and building, and resilient urban development, mobility, and infrastructure. Of course, there are also other solutions listed there, but I just want to highlight. This is the perfect opportunity to collectively identify how are we advancing progress? How are we supporting this agenda? What are the gaps for implementation? This year, the negotiation track is going to deliver the global goal on adaptation, very critical for helping us track progress in the future and give the signals what adaptation is critical to accelerate across key themes. And that have been picked up in this 4th letter is recognizing the results of the global stocktake, bringing and forward-looking what's going to be the results of the global goal on adaptation, and advance an agenda of action, an agenda of delivery that responds to the GST, that responds to the global goal on adaptation. So your inputs, your collaboration, your progress are critical for us to better reflect and then bring this back to the parties so that the COPs have a sense more of tracking progress. And I hope that you can also give us your inputs and support us in this endeavor this year. So happy now to introduce Amelia Burnett, which is the Digital Financial Strategies Director from Bentley Systems, to present on the role of tech and innovation in integrating GEDSI principles into infrastructure decision-making.
Thank you, Marcia. The topic sounds like quite a mouthful, doesn't it? Let's see if we can break it down. So kia ora koutou. I wanted to start by saying thank you to our hosts, GCoM and the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, and the Race to Resilience, and my colleagues at Bentley for welcoming us here today. It's an honour to share a platform alongside such a distinguished lineup of speakers. And also, it's an honour to be able to speak to a topic that's so close to my heart, the role of technology and how we can leverage technology and innovation to build more inclusive cities. When I say close to my heart, it's because over the last decade, the way that I've interacted with cities has changed. I've gone from being not really thinking about how I'm going to get around other than making sure that I'm on the train line, to really having to meticulously plan, is there an elevator? Am I going to be able to push a pram or get a toddler into a space or find a clean bathroom? I'm not just having to think about myself anymore, I'm also having to think about what it's like to move through the space in the city with a disabled father who, anytime I want to step in and help him, says, "Don't disable me, I want to be enabled." And technology has a really powerful role in helping that when we're designing and redesigning spaces and assets in cities, to put people front and centre, not just in considering the needs of people, but in allowing people to advocate for what works for them and how a space is going to enable them and not disable them in order to have the access to food and leisure and friends, or just being able to pop to a park and enjoy a lovely view and a play on the playground with a group of toddlers. These things are all incredibly important, and technology is currently playing a role in helping to do this. I'm going to run through two different case studies today on how that's happened. The first is a case study from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, in my home country of New Zealand, in which technology was used for participatory design. Now, the challenge that we have in Auckland is that the way in which the rail network was designed, we have a lot of what are called pedestrian level crossings, which is essentially you have to walk over the train tracks to get to a train station or to move through the neighbourhood around train stations. In the decade between 2013 and 2023, this led to about 250 near misses between pedestrians and trains. And as part of a safety rollout, they're replacing those level crossings and looking to improve access to stations. One of such stations is a station called Homai train station, which sits in a very diverse community, and it also sits alongside a school for blind and low vision people. The design team, Becca, were able to use innovations in three quite interesting ways. The first was designing a digital model of the space, a digital twin. It's then how they were able to use that for community engagement, which I think is really interesting to look at in terms of GEDSI principles. Engaging with blind and low vision people within a model is obviously challenging. There are ways that's been done. In Cross River Rail in Brisbane, they've been able to dim the lighting in their virtual model centre so that people can experience the space as it would be with low vision. In this instance, Becca, the design team, 3D printed the proposed station design using Braille. So took that engineering data and created a 3D model that they were then able to take into the school and into the local communities. And through touch, the end users of the station were able to engage with what this space felt like so that it could be designed in a way that enabled and not disabled them. And because they're also young people learning how to navigate independently through the city, we're able to give feedback so that when that station was finalised, they felt confident to be able to be independently using it. This model had a third application as well, which was a way to engage with wheelchair users of the station and in the community. The models, and many of you may have used them when feeding, either designing projects or feeding into the design of projects, allow you to walk through a space so that you can walk through a building before there's even shovels in the ground. Now, what the models also let you do is to navigate through at a wheelchair view. So you could see the sight lines as if you were a wheelchair user of the station. And in doing this and engaging with wheelchair users, they're able to see that actually the way that the ramp designed it was inclusive and lovely and wide, right up until the very end where there was a sharp turn into a narrow footpath alongside a busy road. So the station itself and if we look at the boundary of where the project was, everything ticked the boxes, but it didn't integrate into the local community and the local place. So the design was improved, a wide funnel exit was put in place, which then has meant that it is a much more, it is a space that's empowering people to use it. The second example and case study that we're looking to is the way in which the technology is being used to improve the resilience of a city as well. And that is the city of Perry. So we're going to go from New Zealand over to Tornado Alley in Iowa, where a technology program being deployed for inclusive purposes has ended up with a whole range of benefits from the city. So the challenge the city had, this growing city, was the need to show compliance against the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a set of standards setting out best practice for inclusivity in city and asset design. And they specifically needed to look at the ramps and footpaths of the city to see if there was the compliance there. The traditional way of doing this is manual inspection. You send people out, they take photos, they document, and then you've got a one-time fixed view of whether or not you have compliance. Now, the city instead partnered with the engineering agency FOF, who proposed using LiDAR scanning, so using laser scanning in order to create a virtual reality mesh digital twin of the city that has layers of applications over it, so they were able to check for ADA compliance, but they're also able to have an accurate register of the street furniture, so that that could be regularly updated, so that you could see, for example, has a sign been covered by some vegetation? Or is there a give way or a stop sign missing? Which has two benefits. One, you're keeping people safer and the city safer, but you're also protecting yourself as the city against litigation if anything goes wrong, because you're showing that you're actively maintaining and you're actively complying with the standards that are needed. Now, in developing this digital twin, it also unlocked a whole range of other fantastic insights around resilience. So through having the data and real-time information about the city, not only are the city able to make more informed investment decisions around where investment might be needed to improve the resilience of, say, for example, looking after vegetation, or if they can see degradation and putting in those just-in-time measures in place to make sure that the city is safe and working for everyone, but also to support with any rebuild efforts and disaster recovery. So the city managers gave a fantastic endorsement of the digital twin, which was that when one of their neighbouring towns unfortunately had a tornado go through, it took out the historic centre of the town. Now, Perry also has a historic town centre. And through the twin, they're able to preserve that, and so that if there ever is a rebuild, they're able to get easier access to make sure that they can put something back in place that replaces what was there, because what has happened for the neighbouring city, unfortunately, is there are only photographs. So this shows the way in which technologies can be used not just for one applications, but once you put that investment in place, there are many different ways that that could be done. So we're looking at it in terms of ADA compliance, but you can also imagine that it becomes a tool as well for engagement with people in the same way that we're seeing in Hormai in Auckland, where you can start to model and predict different scenarios and see, are you prepared for this for the people, so that we can continue to enable people. And I think it's really lovely to end on one of the quotes, and I'm going to paraphrase because the screen on my computer has turned off. But it was the city manager of Perry saying that actually our job is to make the city livable for people, and that's the reason that we ultimately do that. And I think having that front in mind, if we're thinking about we want our cities and our spaces to be livable and enabling and empowering for all people, the technology to help do that, it's mature. It's there. It helps you have that real experience of what it's like to move through a space so that you can bring more people into the design and engagement process and end up with a better output. And we're going to hear more from that on our next speaker, who is going to be talking about a bridge program that has been doing just that and also using technology. So thank you very much, and I look forward for the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Amelia. Fantastic examples. And now my pleasure to introduce to Tina Gunnarsson, East Africa Corporate Manager, Bridges to Prosperity, to present on the impact that trail bridges have on underrepresented groups. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Yep. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. Post-lunch slump. Let's see if we can change that. So my name is Tina Gunnarsson. I work for an organization called Bridges to Prosperity. And today I'd like to present a case study that draws upon 600 bridges that we have built in rural communities in the Global South, focusing especially on East Africa and Rwanda, where I am based. I'm going to share how trail bridges like this one can be a climate-smart tool to alleviate poverty for the world's most vulnerable, and it can be a real leveler for gender equality, disability, and social inclusion. So, when it comes to building socially inclusive infrastructure, have any of you heard of the saying, in case of climate emergency, bring people to the table, then reinforce the floor? Nope. Okay, that's all right. Basically, all that is saying is to build climate resilient and socially inclusive infrastructure, we need to listen to people. We need to give them a platform to be heard. At Bridges to Prosperity, we take action by building bridges, not tables. And we don't bring people to our infrastructure, we bring our infrastructure to the people. So, we bring bridges to the people and then we reinforce the deck. And this is what we in the engineering community call a full capacity live load test. It all starts and it ends with the community. So I consider myself really, really lucky as East Africa Corporate Manager and as Sustainability Lead at Bridges to Prosperity, where I'm based in Rwanda, and I get to spend a few days every week basically out in the rural communities, supporting various bridge builds and just listening and understanding what these structurally quite simple bridges really mean to the communities. So let me share some of the many things I have learned from building bridges in Rwanda that I think the rest of the world could also learn from. Rwanda is actually the most densely populated country in Africa, but you would never guess because it doesn't have that gray, bustling megalopolis that is outside the window or Nairobi or Lagos. Rwanda is very, very green. It's known as the land of 1,000 hills, and between those hills is a river system that is seeing increasingly severe flooding due to climate change. Rwanda is doing a phenomenal job bringing infrastructure to people to navigate these hills and watercourses, rather than asking people to move into the urbanized areas where the infrastructure is. Rwanda is choosing green over gray. So, most rural communities have schools, they have hospitals, markets, and business administration centers. What they don't have is easy access to those services, particularly in rainy season, where increasingly severe and frequent flood events are washing away the temporary bridges. Many people are losing their lives, their livestock, and their market goods trying to cross these rivers during rainy season. Or they face being cut off for several weeks at a time. And that's where we come in, except it starts and it ends with the community. They are involved every single step of the way. We're simply the enablers. So it will start with a village holding a village meeting, asking for a more permanent bridge solution. It gets escalated to district or sector level within local government, who then reach out to Bridges to Prosperity. So we're a non-profit. We partner with funders and the government to construct trail bridges within the local community. Government will pay for part of the bridge, and then B2P secures funding, tools, materials for the remaining parts. We then hire 25 to 40 people from the local community, and we work shoulder to shoulder with them to construct these bridges. And we share as much technical knowledge as we possibly can. So once complete, 10 of these community members are then chosen to form a bridge committee, who are responsible for inspection, maintenance, repair, and reporting larger issues to the government technical engineer. So the same person who requests that bridge, say Augustin, pictured right here, may work on the bridge, and he may then end up maintaining it for generations to come. And that's how we make infrastructure inclusive. We include and we involve the community and the end users every single step of the way. And it's not just for Augustin, it's also for their children. So here's a photo from a build I did back in 2018, one of the only images high-res enough for the screen. It's called Minigo Bridge in northern Rwanda, where I directly interacted with the 800 children who would now have safe year-round access to their education. And we don't just listen qualitatively, we also quantify that data. So far, we've constructed over 600 bridges globally, and here's what that data tells us. In terms of economic empowerment, we've seen a 70% increase in farm profits, we've seen 60% more women entering the labor force, and a 49% annual return on investment. So what that means is that these bridges pay themselves back within 2 to 3 years. In terms of education, we've seen a 22% increase in student attendance, and specifically for gender, a 200% increase in the attendance for girls, and then a 60% increase in literacy rate for women. Whilst we're looking at the GEDSI stats, let's also take a look at the link between disability and healthcare. So wheelchair users, community members on crutches, they really struggle crossing the temporary timber bridges. And they often have to be carried across by other community members. And during the floods, their ability to get to healthcare appointments is basically non-existent, able-bodied or not. And that's for up to several weeks at a time. And it's not just physical disabilities. So maternal deaths during labor significantly reduced, as that 3-hour walk to try get to that healthcare facility is reduced down to about 15 minutes. So in terms of access to healthcare, trail bridges increase health facility visits, by 18%, and we've seen an increase in vaccination rates by 45%. So whilst our bridges are designed with different physical abilities in mind, sloping ramps leading up to the deck, fencing, particularly for the kids, they're not perfect. In terms of lateral movement, there's quite a bit of sway, especially as we build longer and longer trail bridges. And there is a reason we're building longer and longer bridges. So due to climate change, flooding is becoming more severe and more unpredictable. So we're building longer and longer spans to mitigate against bank erosion and to future-proof that infrastructure. So here, you can see this temporary timber bridge during dry season, and you can see the 120-meter-long Chiahafi Bridge that we've constructed for climate resilience. And you can already see, just about, the floodplains either end where the flooding comes up in wet season or in rainy season. So this is what fighting climate change looks like in real time. It is more carbon intensive, but we are trying to use circular economy principles to battle that. So the bridge cables that you can see here and here, they are donated from shipping ports in the US and the Middle East. We inspect them and we use them exactly as is without any energy-intensive recycling. This is kind of circular economy in action. So by using these principles, minimal heavy machinery, locally manufactured or sourced materials, each bridge saves an estimated 4.2 tons of CO2 equivalents per bridge, and a further 2.1 per bridge per year had the community utilize vehicles instead of pedestrianization. So, what next? This is going back a little bit into Amelia's field of expertise. And if you were here last year, you may remember my colleague Eniola, who shared that we're developing not just engineering solutions, but tech solutions to create that kind of systems approach to rural infrastructure. So what we're doing is we're using AI to map first up to 77 million miles of previously unmapped waterways. That's tripling the number of known waterways worldwide using something we are calling WaterNet. And we're then using all of the data that we have collected from communities and carrying out needs assessment to identify sites with the biggest potential impact. And we've called that FICA map, which is what you can see here. The best part about it is it's all open source, so all about collective action. Globally, we're training more and more people to build bridges in Zambia, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Rwanda. We're training government, we're training private sector, we're training schools. We're giving access to this data to governments, to policymakers, to funders, decision makers, pretty much anyone who's willing to listen. That includes you guys. And we're basically trying to scale. We're trying to scale fast and big time so that we can end poverty caused by global isolation within our lifetime. But using AI doesn't mean we stop listening to communities. It just means we actually put them on the map. And we give them a voice. Like Marcia said about COP30, it's all about the people. To build inclusive infrastructure, decision makers, engineers, bridge builders would need to be inclusive too. And Rwanda is leading the way. So they have the highest number of women in parliament at 63% in the world. Inclusion is all about giving people a voice and including them in the process. So in case of climate emergency, build bridges, not barriers. In case of climate emergency, listen to the people. Prioritize the people who don't have a voice, those who are hardest hit, but not consulted. Prioritize rural access, not just urban. Prioritize the global south, not just the north. And let's work towards a global future where we choose green over gray and eco over ego. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to both of you, Amelia and Tina. Amazing cases to enable people and to listen to people. Exactly what we need. And to have a private discussion now, I'll invite both of you to remain at the panel, and we'll bring really nice additional experts on the field. It's my pleasure to bring to the panel Professor Pirit Parikh, Director, Bartlett School of Sustainable Construction, UCL. Namrata Ginoya, Strategic Policy Lead from the Global Resilient Partnership. Also, our dear Sheila Patel, Director, Society for the Promotion of the Area Research Center. So we have, yes, very good. Both of you, and then the three speakers. Everyone needs to come to the front. Very good, thank you. Are we missing? Are we having an extra chair? Oh yeah, very good, super. So we heard about enabling, thank you, I need this. and listening to people. We heard about real action happening. We heard about the power of connecting rural with urban, the power of integrating resilient solutions relevant for mitigation and adaptation, especially that responds to the needs of people. And what does it mean for all of us when we recognize this event is also elevating the work of partners leading on the race to resilience, partners actively contributing to the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda, and in a moment of a global opportunity to elevate the agenda on adaptation and resilience, it's also critical to hear how exactly, what are the opportunities to advance even more. So I'm happy to start with one first question for Sheila, Priti, Namrata, and Asma. Why it's so important to integrate GEDSI into climate-resilient infrastructure planning, and how does it strengthen outcomes for cities and communities? Who would like to start? Namrata, very good.
Okay, I'll start. I would say basically it improves the effectiveness of the infrastructure itself. If it is not built for the people who are going to access it, it's not effective enough. For example, and it's also the integration part of it. We have the Global South is now developing a lot of like metro systems, subway systems, and all of them are very well designed, accessible, inclusive. As soon as you step out, no one who is completely healthy cannot access it well. There's no access on the road side, on the footpath side for the disabled. And obviously, as Amelia mentioned, women with kids, very difficult to cross the road. So the effectiveness reduces very drastically if not designed. So, but I'll pass on to.
Fabulous. Would you like to continue, Sheila? Fabulous.
Okay, I'm going to provide a kind of UK and then international perspective, especially because it's been a big month in UK with the spending review, with kind of industrial strategy, commitment to infrastructure, clean energy. But what is interesting is we've got a shortfall of 200,000 people in the construction sector. So whilst commitments are being made, we are not in a position to deliver on those. Now, if we think about what does the shortfall mean for the industry, if we look around boardrooms, places where decisions have been made about planning, design and delivery of infrastructure, you'll see that it lacks representation and voices, whether it's voices from women or those who are physically more challenged. And what that means is when we take decisions about infrastructure, the shape of infrastructure in our cities, it's not inclusive, reflective of those users. We don't think about how would youth navigate some of the darker spaces which are not well lit at night. So I think that's the UK perspective, that actually we have a bigger problem on hand. And if we really are serious about GEDSI principles, we actually need the workforce to reflect that. And we need to bring everyone on board with some of our industries. Now, internationally, and Sheila, I know you can talk a little bit more about this. If we think about our cities, climate change is driving migration into cities, and then you have informal settlements, places where communities end up in very fragile, vulnerable positions. But particularly, if we think about lack of infrastructure, sanitation equates to spreading disease. And then quite often it is women who are the kind of frontline workers, who are the caregivers. If there's lack of clean water, it means that women are the ones who have to walk longer distances. Lack of clean energy means it's kind of, once again, girls who are at risk because they're the ones who are looking for fuels, often end up in very vulnerable locations and situations where they are attacked. Whether it's a shortage of food due to agriculture, it means it's often girls who are left behind when it comes to nutritional needs and the time burden. So I think GEDSI is absolutely vital, both in terms of the skill, the talent pipeline we develop, and then how we deliver infrastructure.
Sheila.
I want to go even more
deeply into the number game that you're talking about, and that is that we don't have to wait for climate to bring more people in. There are already a humongous number of people, families, individuals who have been excluded from a decent place to live, a decent place to work. And what you find is that this is bad enough for people who are able to have no specific disabilities. When you go into the disability situation, then it is horrific because you take a simple thing like a toilet. What does a person who is paraplegic do with a regular toilet? Can't do it. You can't go there. You look at the situation of roads and other things that you're talking about. But I think the real challenge is that the demography and the reality of who lives in the city, despite all the amazing breakthroughs of data and all kinds of things, we still cannot acknowledge how many people live in substandard homes all over the world, including the north, but terribly in the south. So whether, so you look at the houses of the people for whom you're building the bridges. You look at the fact that 3 to 4 generations of people are living without decent water, toilets, drainage, sewage, roads, and have to often walk to work because the transport system in their city is not designed to make it accessible to them. So women often have to walk for an hour before they can reach public transport. So I think that if you look at every aspect of life in the city, it excludes 40 to 60% of people who live in the global south in cities. That is not acceptable. And that is something which remains something that amazes me, because in intelligent conversations, we talk about inclusion, we talk about sensitivity, we talk about what women and girls need, and yet none of this is actually included in the design of the city. It is like that what you talk here and what you talk there are two different things. And I think that our education, the obsession of doing things in perfection, building standards, for instance. Nobody looks at what poor people can afford and how can you produce a strong home for them. No, because by the time you finish saying which material is good and bad, everything poor people use is bad. And they don't have any skill sets supporting them to make their homes leak less, manage heat better, for their roofs not to fly in cyclonic winds. And now all these things have come home to roost. You look at the volume of people whose lives are getting completely decimated with between 40 to 45 degrees heat for almost 60 to 70 days of the year. What does it do to their health? Yeah. What does it do to their ability to walk for 1 hour? So I think that there has to be a radical need to acknowledge that democratization and democracies in the global south do not automatically produce these things, and that we have ancient badly designed cities that only work for the elite. And so I feel that we have begun by saying, okay, if 90% of people who live informally design, construct, and finance their own homes, what can we do to support them to get better materials, better designs, and within the money that they have, improve the quality of life, and shame their cities into saying, let's do something with the infrastructure to at least compensate them for what they're doing. And I think this is a very important thing for all of us
now working in the climate and development space, because you can't separate the two. And our claim to everybody is you cannot do any development without having an underpinning of climate science. And we all have, especially all of us who claim to support all these things, have to push for education, research, and the production of interesting new materials to have it accessible to them. Otherwise, we continue this thing and actually fulfill the aspirations of many elitists who say, if the world can handle 300, one-third of the population, we don't worry about the others. And if we are not careful, we are going in that direction. Sorry
Thank you,
to say
Sheila.
such bad things.
Incredible remarks, especially on really tackling issues that are at the system level. Happy to pass it to Asma.
Can I very quickly add something? I mean, there's absolutely something about a moral imperative, and there's absolutely something about professionalism and standards and just good urban planning. I think also from the financial perspective, so the projections are that we're going to need 4.5 trillion annually through to 2050 to build the infrastructure that we need globally. We say that 800 billion of that should come from the public sector to catalyze the private sector. We say that for low-income countries, the variance is between 0.6% and 2.4% of GDP. Like, these are all numbers. Nobody knows the exact figure, but essentially, it's billions and trillions. They're massive numbers. Most of that has to come from user fees. If you don't have infrastructure that is usable by your citizens, you don't have a return on investment. You don't have a good business case. You want to increase your productivity, your GDP, your last mile connectivity has to be there to be able to make sure that your infrastructure is affordable. We can put the morality and the urban planning aside. You need money to build infrastructure. You've got people moving to cities. Migration is happening because of climate change. User fees are your best way to do that, to make sure your infrastructure works for the people that need to use it day to day. So, yeah.
Which is a very good segue to our next question. What are some practical ways GEDSI is being applied through policy, design, or participation? And can you share examples of what has worked? I'd like to start with participatory planning in regards to how can vulnerable groups meaningfully be involved in infrastructure planning and related decision-making. Preeti?
Sure. So I'm going to provide perspective in terms of kind of research tools, methodologies, approaches we use in close collaboration with partners who then work on the ground. And I know, Sheila, you're going to talk more about kind of applications on the ground. So I'm going to touch on a couple of projects and ideas. I had a fantastic PhD student from Mexico who was really troubled by safety on streets, safety in neighborhood, around infrastructure, transportation. So she kind of developed this mixed method kind of approach of using a combination of digital tools, where she got residents to kind of map what they thought were the hotspots of kind of unsafe areas in the city, combined with focus group conversations to then dig a bit deeper into the more precise issues around infrastructure, but also individual interviews, because some of the conversations are very, very sensitive and deeply personal around incidents of harassment. And predominantly it was observed that it was the youth, the younger people, who felt more insecure, unsafe around whether it's bus stops, around those forms of infrastructure compared to the older demographic. And I think that's probably unsurprising. But what we did is then we kind of obtained data, coordinates of where people felt they were unsafe, to develop heat maps. And this is important because in a lot of cities, we do not have this data, because how would governments collect the data? And B, it's very difficult for people to go and report on incidents. And most of the times there's no action. So why would you bother spending hours at the police station reporting about an attack or theft or something when you know there's not going to be action? So this data actually does not exist. So part of this data capturing is this inclusive participatory approach. But then we use this to kind of come up with solutions, which included things like better lighting, or kind of avoiding areas which are difficult to access, or avoiding very narrow routes for example, where women felt there was no escape if there was a situation. So we actually used that to inform some of the planning processes in Mexico. Another example is in East Africa, where we are working with residents in informal settlements to co-design nature-based solutions. And there, actually, we started off initially with the narrative of people nature positive, but then communities have pushed back to say, well, we want to challenge that narrative, because for us, nature-based solutions also need to kind of contribute to economic well-being, need to contribute to livelihood. So now I have my researchers in Kenya who are going to run focus group discussions where we're going to have very open conversations with youth, with people of different gender backgrounds about, do they see being protected by nature? Do they see themselves as conserving nature? Do they, very open questions of, are they caregivers? Are they going to benefit from nature? How does infrastructure come into this? What is the role of infrastructure? So as academics, as researchers, we are constantly using kind of mixed methods, also bringing in more kind of AI and those advances as well, seeing how we can deploy those technologies. And I think they were mentioned in the presentation earlier, which was quite nice. So thinking about machine learning models and how we can deploy those in conversations as well.
And Sheila, maybe it would be great as well to hear from you. How can vulnerable groups be meaningfully involved?
I'll give two examples.
Yeah.
Okay. The first one was that the city of Mumbai wanted a big loan from the World Bank to improve their black water treatment. And they wanted an IDA loan. And all of us said, well, poor people don't shit in toilets, so why should you get an IDA loan? So the city decided to spend get one-third more money to build toilets in informal settlements. And we had all the consultants from the World Bank coming to us to talk about this, and they wanted to build toilets inside people's homes. So we objected to, the women objected to that, saying if the house is less than 320 square feet, does not have running water or drainage and sewage, the toilet cannot be inside the house. And everybody, all the professionals were very upset. They said, how can you do that? And they said, look, it's very simple. The toilet will have to be next to the kitchen because that's how small our home is. And if the shit doesn't pass through, the same flies are going to come into our food. So what do you think is going to happen? This is what women were saying. This is not what the hygiene specialist and other people were saying. So they said that you build community toilets until such time that you build the sewer system. Now, this is, for me, one of the most interesting things. The other thing they said was, why is it that when you build toilets in community toilets for men and women, men have urinals plus toilets, and women just have toilets? Actually, women. And the conversations about the details of the design, the location, and all these things, they came from the women. And you would not, even we sat there and we just looked at them because we hadn't prompted them, we hadn't trained them, nothing. It was they who decided it. And they also said to the municipality and to the World Bank that all your regular contractors are not going to be able to build toilets in slums. So you'll have to find contractors from the informal sector. You can train them, you can supervise them, and the whole procurement system and the design and everything was changed on the basis of this issue that was brought up. And they built so those toilets worked for about, I don't know, there were about 560 community toilets that were built, but they only served about 1/3 of the population. And now the city's taken it up to do more. But I'm just saying that if you talk about design, all the architects, all the planners in our city were very upset with us. This is not the right way to do things, this, that, but that's what worked. And they said it should work for only 20 years, after which you should change the way we live and we should get toilets in our own homes. So So just giving an example of a design process. And then we had women who said, oh, but we have old people and young children who can't squat because these are squatting toilets. So everywhere there were two, like what you have here, standing commodes for people with disabilities and for old people who cannot squat. But the others were all squatting ones. So just to give you an example of a design
Very
element.
practical. Exactly, very practical and has to fit the customer's reality. So moving on, the opportunities on policy. How can local governments and city leaders better align their infrastructure resilient goals with GEDSI principles? So happy to bring Namrata and then Asma for this.
Obviously, first thing is to include people in the co-design. That's the first step. What we see is when some of this infrastructure is being planned, obviously there's risk assessments, then there's design, then you implement the project, and then there's supposed to be some sort of accountability monitoring mechanism. That's generally the principle. But all of these stages just generally don't consider GEDSI. So first is to actually integrate at every phase that you're going to do it. I'll also give an example of where some of these things did not work was that we were working on, at least I was looking after some of the disaster shelters that were going to be, that already had been implemented in certain areas. And when we go there, you cannot access those shelters because it goes through someone else's land. And if that person doesn't give you permission, you can't actually access the shelter itself. So nobody actually used it. The second was that the shelter was built for flood-prone areas, but it did not have any water supply, it did not have any toilets. So there was a time when people were stuck there for 3 days before they were evacuated post-flooding. So those are the kind of just basically decided this is the place we will build one shelter without understanding the needs, without actually doing any sort of assessment where it should be built. The second one is design principles. The location, they did not check where it is, again, in this case, but at least it was accessible. The only issue was that it was actually built on a organic waste mound. So as soon as it decomposed, the structure broke. So that's the design part of it. So it's actually phase-wise. Every phase, there has to be inclusion of the community. They can tell you where you're locating it is correct or not, if the design is correct or not, if it will be accessible or not. So the effectiveness reduces drastically, as I mentioned earlier, if they do not. So that's the policy level side of things.
Thank you, Asma.
Yeah, just very quickly adding to those great points. So yes, there's definitely something about co-design, but I think Sheila sort of touched on it when she mentioned procurement, which is a really powerful tool for municipalities to embed GEDSI principles, and then using, it's great to have policy decisions, but making sure that these principles are embedded at each stage of the project lifecycle, having that consistency. Equality impact assessments often get, poo-pooed a little bit, but I think they're really important at each stage because the municipality does have so much sway in how these pieces of infrastructure, often they're the biggest employer as well. So kind of employing local people, upskilling, training, moving them potentially to green jobs is all kind of part of that kind of good green growth.
And all of those points really helps understand how critical it is to understand the enabling conditions, the context, the locally led opportunities, the access to also cross-fertilize and increase capacity so that decision makers better understand the realities and the local actors have voice to bring to the table, which connects me to an enabling condition paper that recently the Race to Resilience campaign, together with the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda partners, have released. So you are probably going to see that on the Climate Champions website. a little cherry for the extra work on really helping us also elevate opportunities to improve decision making. It's not only about solutions, what you said, Sheila, is critical. It's also how do we understand what is helping to make those solutions more feasible, practical. In that sense, making to the next question on designs and methodologies, expanding on your presentations, what challenges do you face in ensuring representation and inclusion? And how can design tools, methodologies help to address these? Tina and Amelia, please.
Thank you, Tina. Well, it makes me think of something that you said in your presentation around how you bring infrastructure to people. And I think what's important is that you also need to bring engagement to people. Often the way that engagement has been done around infrastructure decisions, at least in the part of the world where I've lived, it is come to this space and give your feedback on some paper models, often at a time that's just not accessible for people who work or have family commitments, and therefore the people who are giving feedback into design, it doesn't tend to be representative. It's part of the reason why that whole my case study resonated with me so strongly, because that was actually bringing the engagement to the people in a way that they can engage and give meaningful feedback. And I would add to that bringing the engagement to the people isn't a one-time job. You know, the life of infrastructure is long, the design process, the construction process is long. And if you use digital tools to engage with people in a meaningful way across that life cycle, you will end up de-risking your project. If you go to people early doors and say, we are looking to address this challenge that's come from the community, not we're putting a road through this, or we're going to put traffic lights here, but actually what is needed to help people move more safely through this space, and you go through those co-design processes, you are at every stage building social license. Because if the public turns on your project, then it becomes a lot harder to complete. And it also, by bringing people in at every stage, you're making sure that the project works, because it has been so wisely pointed out, we need to pay for these projects, and we are looking more towards the private sector to pay for the projects, and that means they need to be used, they need to be generating revenue, and therefore if you can make it work for the widest range of people, you're also creating a larger market. And also by bringing people in, you're avoiding rework as well, and avoiding some of those delays and those costs. So by bringing the engagement to the people in a way that they can engage with, whether it is through AI tools that mean that there's easy translation of the materials as well, or a range of different ways, so depending on your abilities, but also neurodivergence. We've been trying to choose a colour to repaint the kitchen, and I've been at heads with my husband about it, because and we finally realised he can't visualise what I'm talking about. For me, I can stand in and I can see all of the things that I could change. And I thought I was doing a great job of communicating that. But it wasn't until I, pulled out a design tool and was able to be like, this is what it will look like, see? That I was able to get that buy-in, because I had to, bring the engagement to him. But I was right about the paint colour.
I'm going to take a slightly different, approach to answering the question. So in terms of design tools, methodologies, I'll relate this back to what we do at Bridges to Prosperity. We've got specific impact and needs assessment teams. So we have people we deploy who go out into the field to speak with people and actually understand and collect the data, understand the problems. And one of the tricky things is knowing what questions to ask and asking the right questions. Something that is increasingly more interesting is in terms of disabilities, this conversation that not all disabilities are visible. And I think the conversation is not as developed in the Global South as it is in the Global North. Even in the Global North, neurodiversity is becoming increasingly more commonly talked about, and it's understanding how infrastructure can be designed in a more accessible way. Once we collect that data, it's then actually using the data for inclusive design. There's so many toolkits out there, so there's no need to reinvent the wheel. but it's actually using the toolkits and putting that into practice. And then the biggest challenge for us is holistic and its systems. So it's all good and well putting 600 bridges in place for last mile connection. It's fine designing ramps with 1 to 10 gentle slopes so people can get on there with their wheelchairs. But if that bridge on either side has got unpaved road, which is like mud or gravel, then a wheelchair user won't be able to get access to it in the first place. And we're now trying to expand and take that more holistic view. So how do we look at wider rural access, not just how do we go beyond trail bridges, how do we incorporate the AI and the tech and the mapping to really build connective, holistic infrastructure systems as opposed to isolated bridges.
Wonderful, especially on the points of not reinventing the wheel, using what already well is advanced and bringing a systems perspective. And with that, we're moving to the last and final question, which is helping us to have a very quick round, like 1 minute. What is needed to scale up inclusive and resilient infrastructure, whether in terms of investment, leadership, or tools, over the next 5 to 10 years? What would be what you would prioritize? Let's start with Ramrata.
Okay. Since Asma mentioned procurement, I'd say finance, if you're building a project, then there has to be budgeting for GEDSI inclusion, from risk assessments to monitoring. That would actually help. Otherwise, it's more like we don't have the budget, and so we don't know. And the second is training, because even city planners or folks who do design this and plan this, they really don't know what GEDSI is. Or as soon as you mention gender, they equate it to women. And that's when most of the men who are part of the design will stop looking at it. And so that's where the training part of it, that GEDSI is not just about women.
Fabulous, yes.
Building on your excellent intervention, I was thinking about leadership, but leadership in higher education sector. So part of it's looking at our curriculum and bringing GEDSI principles into our curriculum, so the way we deliver teaching, but also who we deliver teaching to, and building up a diverse kind of talent pipeline, which we currently don't have. We only have 12% of women, and I know it's not just about women, but it's just that in terms of diverse groups in leadership boardrooms, it's a very small stat. So I think from the leadership perspective, it's building that diverse kind of talent pipeline to go into built environment, to design, deliver those interventions where you have different voices, but different day-to-day lived experiences. Because the more you have that, it helps the teams to understand how would it feel if you had this protected characteristic or this characteristic and you were navigating or traveling across the city.
Sheila?
I'm going to twist your question to the answer I want to give. What I want to take this to is that in order to produce new sustainable infrastructure, 9 out of 10 times, it requires evictions of people who live informally to produce that infrastructure. And in the past, there was a lot of resistance that stopped it, but now the imperative to, say, put new railway lines, to put new infrastructure, has meant thousands and thousands of households stand to be evicted on this process. So one of the big breakthroughs that Slum Dwellers International has had is that our networks actually document who is there and how, by working with them rather than chucking them out, you can fulfill both your poverty goals as well as do your project on time. Because we've actually identified that every project that gets derailed ends up spending 50% more of the investment. Asma can give me all the nice numbers. You know, we've actually proved both to the bank and to the governments in Asia and Africa that if you do honest, good quality rehabilitation of the people who need to move in order for this big infrastructure to come, you get goodwill, you do your poverty alleviation commitments, but you also finish your project on time so you don't have to pay interest at the end.
Yeah.
And we've calculated that it is between 11 to 17% that you have to end up spending on the rehabilitation of the people who are moved. So I'm just saying that infrastructure is never looked at from this angle, because somehow 90% of the investments for large infrastructure in southern cities, I'm talking about cities now, affects people living informally. So
Thank
sorry
you,
about
Sheila.
changing it.
Tina, I'll do the opposite. I'll answer the question directly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we need two things to scale. We need funding. There's been a lot of cuts recently with USAID, with the UK government cutting funding. We need funding to scale. We have a solution. We know what we're doing. We need the money to do it.
Yeah.
And the second thing is government support. We need government buy-in for the long-term maintenance and the long-term resilience of these infrastructure that we're putting in place in order to make it fully sustainable, especially in light of climate change.
Fantastic. Amelia?
I think there's two things. We need this to be very driven by those who are funding and financing the infrastructure, and whether that is private or public sector. Right. But I think secondary to that is we need to get the story right to get them to buy into this. And as was mentioned, sometimes you say gender and people turn off. You say social inclusion, people turn off. You use an acronym like GEDSI and people disengage. If we talk about what this really is, which is, in terms that get people getting their checkbooks out, then that's how we push this forward. So I think it is developing a narrative that is going to unlock more funding and committed funding in a way that will ultimately deliver good outcomes for those return on investment, but also impact for people.
Thank you. Asma?
It's almost like we rehearsed this, Amelia. So I was going to say, from a city perspective, project pipelines. You need good, solid project pipelines. If you are in a low-income, if you're a city in a low-income country, if you're a mayor and you want to push an infrastructure project, it's not going to get any support. There's the World Bank and EIB run the City Climate Finance Gap Fund, which offers project preparation support to cities in OECD DAC list recipient countries at no cost to the city, but you're not going to get that technical assistance if you don't have GEDSI principles embedded, if you don't understand what the impact is going to be for your wider citizens, if you don't know what the climate impact is. So if you want to progress, and if as a mayor you want to take forward, you need a good, solid project pipeline.
And with that, and recognizing that I'm very happy to have an all-female panel, please, I appreciate their participation and a round of applause for the wonderful participants. And with that, I'm very happy to move to the final part of these engagements and invite Savina Carluccio, Executive Director at GCoM, who will deliver the closing remarks.
Right, thank you. Well, thank you. Please stay. Don't leave, don't leave. Don't leave the stage. I'm only just going to speak for a minute to just say thank you very much for coming. This is actually, I'm quite proud that this is possibly the only event on GEDSI. I know acronyms are not great, but probably one of the very few gender equality, disability and social inclusion events. In London Climate Action Week, that means that we really need to be talking about this a lot more. And every time, I mean, I know, Shule, you do this all the time, wherever you go. And so we are, always trying to kind of speak to this topic. But it does require more actors, I guess, maybe the ones that we need to convince, right? This is an important topic, and maybe the ones that will give us challenge, right? In bringing this into implementation. So thank you very much. This year, as we said at the start, our flagship report, which is a collection and curated case studies for climate resilient infrastructure, has got a GEDSI lens. So all of our case studies will actually will mean to show and inspire people on what can be done that delivers climate resilient infrastructure and positive outcomes for gender equality, disability, and social inclusion, because these two things are not disjointed. So it's kind of resilience and resilience for all, planet and people, and all people.
Beautiful.
All right, so thank you so much, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So we'll just have a 30-minute break, and we'll be back for the last session at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Happy to work with you anytime.